The night was eerily silent in Montecito. The darkness hung heavy over the sprawling estate where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had retreated from the world in search of peace. But tonight, the calm was violently shattered. Neighbors reported seeing flashing red and blue lights tearing down the winding private roads, piercing through the quiet Californian night like a dagger. Sirens screamed as paramedics rushed past iron gates, barely slowing down before screeching to a halt in front of the Sussex mansion. Moments later, Harry was wheeled out on a stretcher, his face pale, his body motionless, and Meghan close behind, clutching her phone tightly as if it were the only thing tethering her to reality. For those who had followed Harry's journey from a carefree royal rebel to a man caught in the storm of fame, scandal, and internal turmoil, this was the image they had feared seeing all along. This was not the first emergency dash to the hospital. But as whispers swirled about what had unfolded behind those closed doors, a darker narrative began to emerge. According to multiple sources, this wasn't just a routine medical scare. It was a catastrophic collapse, allegedly fueled by a stress-induced relapse after yet another heated confrontation with Meghan. And this time, the stakes were higher than ever. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The details are shocking and heartbreaking in equal measure. Piers Morgan, the ever-controversial broadcaster and longtime critic of Meghan and Harry, took to social media within hours of the incident, declaring that Harry's Hollywood dream is killing him, and Meghan knows it. In his impassioned tirade, Piers claimed insider knowledge of what truly happened that night, a violent argument over leaked custody documents, with Meghan allegedly threatening to take their children and cut him out completely. Those words, according to sources, sent Harry spiraling into an emotional abyss he could not climb out of. But is Piers telling the truth? Or is this another example of the media machine twisting tragedy into spectacle? As we peel back the layers of this story, one thing becomes clear. The fairy tale that began when Harry and Meghan walked away from the royal family has turned into a nightmare neither of them may survive. This video will take you deep inside the events of that fateful night and the shocking revelations that followed. We will explore the emotional toll fame and isolation have taken on Harry, the explosive dynamics between him and Meghan, and the growing fear within royal circles that the prince is on a path of self-destruction. We'll also confront the question on everyone's lips: has Meghan's influence saved Harry from his demons, or made them worse? But to understand the gravity of what happened, we have to step back and trace how we got here. Harry's life since stepping down as a senior royal has been one of contradiction. To the outside world, he appeared to have everything he wanted: freedom from the rigid protocols of Buckingham Palace, a multi-million-dollar mansion in sunny California, lucrative media deals, and the chance to define his own legacy. Yet, behind the perfectly curated Instagram posts and PR statements, insiders paint a very different picture. A man haunted by regret, struggling to adapt to a life far removed from the traditions and family ties that once grounded him. The cracks began to show earlier this year when Harry was spotted leaving a Beverly Hills clinic, sparking rumors of a secret rehab stint. His team dismissed the claims as malicious fabrications, but sources close to the couple insisted Harry was grappling with intense stress and moments of emotional instability. He had reportedly been self-medicating to cope with the pressures of Hollywood and the unrelenting media scrutiny he and Meghan faced. And then came the custody documents. Leaked court papers revealed that Meghan had quietly been consulting lawyers about securing full custody of Archie and Lilibet should the marriage collapse. According to sources, when Harry confronted her about it, the discussion quickly turned into a shouting match that reverberated through the walls of their mansion. Neighbors later claimed they heard Meghan crying hysterically and slamming doors, while Harry's voice rose in frustration, laced with desperation. No one could have predicted how far the argument would spiral, or how quickly it would lead to tragedy. That night, Meghan reportedly made a chilling threat. She would leave with the children and ensure Harry never saw them again. Whether said in anger or as part of a calculated move, those words were enough to push Harry over the edge. Hours later, he was found unconscious, slumped in his study, an empty glass nearby. As paramedics battled to revive him, Meghan was seen pacing frantically outside, making rapid phone calls. Some say she appeared cold and detached. Others claim she was hysterical and inconsolable. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. But as Harry was rushed to the hospital, the world outside had no idea of the storm that was brewing. Piers Morgan's decision to break the story within hours added fuel to the fire. Appearing live on his show, he launched into a blistering monologue, accusing Meghan of being a toxic force in Harry's life. This man was once the heartbeat of the royal family, Piers declared, his voice rising with anger. Now look at him, broken, lost, and fighting for his life. And why? Because he was ripped away from his family, his country, and everything that gave him stability. His comments divided the public. Some applauded him for saying what others were too afraid to, while Meghan's supporters condemned his words as cruel and opportunistic. Still, the question lingered in the air. Was there any truth to Piers's claims? This is the story of a man at war with himself and the woman he loves. A story of power, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of unresolved pain. As we dive deeper, prepare yourself for revelations that will challenge everything you thought you knew about Harry and Meghan. This isn't just a royal scandal, it's a human tragedy unfolding in real time. Will Harry recover and rebuild his life before it's too late? Or has the chaos that once seemed far away finally consumed him for good? Stay with us as we untangle the web of secrets, lies, and heartbreak that brought Prince Harry to the brink once again. The night was still young when the flashing lights of an ambulance cut through the darkness of Montecito's gated streets, breaking the eerie calm that had settled over the neighborhood. It was a scene reminiscent of a high-stakes drama, but this wasn't a Hollywood set. This was real. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, once the crown jewel of Britain's royal family, was being rushed to the hospital in what sources have described as one of the most alarming episodes of his life. Neighbors stood in stunned silence as paramedics, faces taut with urgency, maneuvered his limp body onto a stretcher and into the back of the vehicle. The air was thick with tension, and behind it all, Meghan Markle was seen following closely, her face pale and unreadable under the harsh glare of the emergency lights. The question everyone was asking: what exactly happened inside that mansion to trigger such a terrifying chain of events? As dawn approached, the pieces of the story began to emerge, painting a picture far more troubling than anyone could have imagined. Multiple insiders reported that earlier in the evening, Harry and Meghan had engaged in a heated argument that shook the foundations of their relationship. At the center of it all were leaked custody documents Meghan had allegedly obtained, documents that could change the trajectory of Harry's life forever. The argument grew louder, more desperate, until it erupted into a verbal explosion that could be heard outside the mansion's gates. "You'll never see your children again," Meghan allegedly screamed, her words cutting through Harry like a blade. Whether she meant them or not is still unclear, but those words reportedly pushed Harry into an emotional freefall. It was said he retreated into his private study, locking the door behind him, and refused to answer when Meghan knocked hours later. By the time she managed to get inside, it was too late. Harry was unresponsive, slumped over his desk, an empty glass beside him, and his phone lying on the floor. Paramedics were called immediately. Meghan's voice was said to be trembling as she relayed the situation to the dispatcher, alternating between sobs and moments of startling calm. Neighbors claimed they saw her pacing on the driveway, clutching her phone and murmuring to herself. Some say she looked distraught. Others described her as cold, detached, as if already preparing for a battle that had yet to begin. When Piers Morgan broke the story hours later, the world was stunned, but not everyone was surprised. Morgan, who has long been one of Meghan's most vocal critics, took to his platform to deliver a fiery commentary. "This is what happens when you rip a man away from his roots, his family, and everything that gave him purpose," Piers said. Harry's descent isn't an accident. It's a direct result of the toxic environment he's been living in. His words sparked an immediate firestorm online, with some hailing him as courageous for speaking the truth, while others accused him of exploiting Harry's suffering for his own agenda. Behind the scenes, Buckingham Palace remained silent. Officially, there were no comments, but royal insiders whispered of growing panic within the family. King Charles was reportedly deeply concerned, while Prince William was said to be furious and heartbroken at the news of his brother's condition. One aide reportedly overheard William muttering to himself, "We warned him this would happen. We all warned him." But this wasn't just about family dynamics anymore. It was about life and death. Hospital sources revealed that Harry had arrived in critical condition but was stabilized after hours of medical intervention. Doctors reportedly warned that his body was under extreme stress and that any further emotional shocks could have devastating consequences. For Harry, this wasn't his first brush with collapse, but could it be his last? Meanwhile, Meghan's behavior in the hospital drew mixed reactions. Some staff described her as frantic and desperate to stay by Harry's side. Others noted that she seemed strangely composed, making rapid phone calls and issuing instructions to her team as if preparing for a PR battle. One nurse allegedly overheard her say, "No one can know the full story. Not now." As the night wore on, tensions escalated further when Meghan reportedly denied members of Harry's family access to him. According to sources, Prince Charles and William had attempted to call the hospital, only to be told that Meghan had restricted communication. This move, if true, could signal a complete rupture between Harry and the royal family, a fracture that may never heal. This is not the first time Harry has faced such turmoil. Those close to him have long worried about his ability to cope with the pressures of his new life in California. Despite outward appearances of success, multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify, a luxurious estate, and public declarations of happiness, insiders insist Harry has struggled privately. His isolation from his family, combined with Hollywood's relentless pace and the constant media spotlight, has reportedly taken a toll on his mental and emotional health. In the days leading up to this incident, Harry had been noticeably absent from public events. Rumors swirled that he was battling severe anxiety and had begun self-medicating to cope. Meghan, according to some reports, had been trying to intervene, but their efforts to reconcile their differences kept ending in explosive arguments. The leaked custody documents were simply the final straw in a relationship already strained to the breaking point. As dawn broke over California, the world was left to wonder. What happens now? Can Harry recover from this latest crisis, or has he reached a point of no return? And what role will Meghan play in his journey forward? Will she be his salvation, or the catalyst for his ultimate undoing? The truth behind that midnight hospital dash remains shrouded in secrecy. But one thing is certain, this story is far from over. What we have witnessed may only be the beginning of a much darker chapter in the life of the prince who once seemed destined to rewrite the royal script. It was still early morning in London when Piers Morgan's phone began buzzing incessantly. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was yet another routine call from his production team. But when the messages started coming in rapid succession, each one more urgent than the last, he knew something seismic had happened. By the time he opened the first email, the subject line alone was enough to make his heart pound. Prince Harry, midnight hospital dash after Montecito collapse. Within minutes, Piers was live on air, his voice steady but his words laced with barely concealed outrage. "Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to share with you is disturbing, heartbreaking, and infuriating all at once," he began, staring directly into the camera. Prince Harry, the once vibrant, strong, and rebellious young man who captured the hearts of millions, is now fighting for his life in a California hospital. And why? Because he's been dragged into a toxic world he was never built to survive. The audience was gripped instantly. Piers, never one to mince words, didn't hold back. He launched into an emotional account of what he claimed had happened in the hours leading up to Harry's hospitalization. Drawing from unnamed sources within Meghan and Harry's inner circle, Piers painted a grim picture of a man on the brink. According to Piers, the argument that triggered Harry's collapse wasn't just an ordinary marital spat. It was a full-blown confrontation over sensitive custody documents Meghan had allegedly been keeping hidden. Those papers, Piers suggested, outlined her intention to secure full custody of Archie and Lilibet in the event of a separation, with plans to relocate them out of the country. When Harry discovered them, the conversation reportedly turned explosive. She looked him in the eye and told him he'd never see his children again. Piers declared, his voice heavy with emotion. That is what broke him. That is what sent him spiraling into this dark abyss. His words reverberated across television screens and social media feeds like a thunderclap. Within hours, hashtags like #SaveHarry, #PiersRevealsAll, and #MeghanExposed were trending globally. Viewers flooded the comments section, some applauding Piers for his candor, others accusing him of sensationalism. But whether you loved or loathed him, there was no denying the power of his message. For years, Piers had been criticized for his relentless focus on Meghan Markle. Many called him obsessive, even vindictive. But this time, his claims struck a nerve. They tapped into a growing unease about Harry's well-being, a fear that the prince, in his quest to escape the confines of royal life, had wandered into something far more dangerous. As the hours passed, Piers doubled down on his assertions. On his next segment, he replayed old interviews where Harry spoke candidly about his mental health struggles and his history with substance use. We've all seen it, Piers said. He's admitted himself that he's battled demons. And yet he was thrown into the shark tank of Hollywood, a place where vulnerability is preyed upon, not healed. Piers wasn't alone in his concerns. Former palace aides, speaking anonymously to protect their positions, shared their own apprehensions. One insider told a tabloid, "We knew Harry was fragile. That's why so many of us begged him not to make such a drastic move. He needed support, not isolation." Another source added, "This was never going to end well. He traded one gilded cage for another." Yet even as the narrative grew more dire, there were those who pushed back. Meghan's supporters accused Piers of exploiting a personal tragedy for ratings. Prominent figures in the Sussex camp labeled his comments as vile and deeply damaging, pointing out that the details he presented were unverified. "This is a woman who has been vilified in the press for years," said one defender. To lay the blame for Harry's struggles entirely at her feet is not only unfair, it's cruel. But for Piers, the criticism only seemed to fuel his determination. In one particularly fiery segment, he addressed his detractors head-on. "You want to silence me because you're afraid of the truth," he said, his eyes narrowing. "But the world deserves to know what's happening to this man. We deserve to know if Harry, the boy who once walked behind his mother's coffin with such quiet strength, has now been reduced to a shell of himself." Viewers around the globe were riveted. Calls poured into radio stations, debates erupted on talk shows, and news outlets scrambled to verify Piers's claims. Everyone wanted answers. Had Harry really relapsed? Was Meghan planning to take the children away? And perhaps most importantly, was there still time to save him? Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the royal family was said to be in crisis mode. Insiders reported that King Charles and Prince William had been briefed on Harry's condition but were struggling to get direct information. Meghan, according to some accounts, had restricted access to Harry, insisting that only she and her medical team should make decisions about his care. For William, this was reportedly the final straw. "He's my brother," he allegedly told a close confidant. "And yet I can't even speak to him." What's happening to Harry isn't just tragic, it's unforgivable. As the hours ticked by, speculation continued to swirl. Was Piers Morgan's account an accurate portrayal of a man in crisis? Or was it an exaggerated narrative crafted to inflame public opinion? Either way, one fact remained unshakable. Prince Harry's life was hanging in the balance, and the world was watching. In the days to come, more pieces of the puzzle would emerge, some validating Piers's warnings, others challenging them. But for now, his voice was the loudest in the room, forcing the public to confront an uncomfortable question. Had Harry's flight from royal duty been an act of liberation, or a slow-motion collapse into chaos? This was no longer about titles, palaces, or prestige. It was about survival. And as Piers concluded his broadcast that morning, his final words sent chills down the spines of millions watching worldwide. Harry needs saving, but who is left to save him now? The walls of the Sussex mansion in Montecito had never felt so suffocating. Inside its sleek, modern halls, designed to project calm and serenity, an emotional hurricane was brewing. For days, tension between Harry and Meghan had been rising, thick in the air like a storm that refused to break. Friends and staff who'd been around them lately described a couple teetering on the edge, unable to find common ground despite the life they had built together. But no one could have predicted how that particular evening would spiral into one of the most catastrophic confrontations of their marriage. It started innocuously enough. Harry had been brooding in his study for hours, surrounded by old photographs of his mother and letters from veterans he had once supported through his charities. Meghan had been busy on calls with her PR team, strategizing about upcoming projects and appearances. But when Harry discovered an envelope tucked among Meghan's papers, a file he was never meant to see, the fragile peace between them shattered instantly. The envelope contained what appeared to be preliminary custody documents, drafts prepared by Meghan's lawyers, outlining the steps she might take if their relationship disintegrated completely. To Harry, it felt like a betrayal of the deepest kind. "Is this what you've been planning?" Harry's voice cracked as he confronted her in the kitchen. The document trembled in his hands, already crumpled from how tightly he was gripping it. Meghan, caught off guard, tried to regain control. "It's a precaution, Harry," she said sharply. "You've been unstable for months. I have to protect the children. Protect them? From me?" Harry shot back, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You're threatening to take them away. You're saying I'll never see them again. Is that what you want?" The air grew heavy with fury and heartbreak. Both of them were shouting now, their voices bouncing off the high ceilings and echoing down the empty hallways. "You think this life is easy for me?" Meghan screamed, tears pooling in her eyes. "I've been fighting off attacks from your family, the press, the entire world, and all you've done is retreat into yourself. I can't do this alone anymore, Harry. I won't." "And you think I can?" Harry's voice was hoarse, his words nearly lost in a choking sob. "I gave up everything for you. My country, my family, my identity. And you're telling me you'll cut me out completely?" That sentence hung in the air, jagged and raw. Neighbors later told reporters they heard muffled yelling coming from the house, louder than they'd ever heard before. One resident described the sound as not just an argument, but something desperate, like two people tearing each other apart. At some point during the fight, Meghan reportedly said words that would haunt Harry for hours. "If you don't get help, I will take the kids, and you'll never see them again." Whether she meant it or was lashing out in anger, no one can say for sure. But to Harry, already fragile and battling inner demons, it was like a dagger to the heart. He stumbled back into his study, slamming the door shut behind him. For hours, Meghan tried to get him to come out, knocking repeatedly, calling his phone, even pleading through the locked door. But Harry remained silent. When she finally managed to force the door open shortly before midnight, the sight that met her was devastating. Harry was slumped over his desk, pale and motionless. An empty glass lay nearby, its contents unknown. Meghan screamed for help, frantically calling emergency services as she tried to rouse him. "I don't know what happened," she reportedly told the dispatcher, her voice breaking. "He's not responding. Please, you have to hurry." Paramedics arrived within minutes. They worked quickly, administering oxygen and checking his vitals as Meghan paced back and forth like a woman possessed. "Is he going to be okay? Tell me he's okay," she demanded repeatedly, her voice rising with each question. One neighbor, awakened by the flashing lights and commotion, later described the scene outside as surreal. "It was like watching a movie, except you knew it was real." Meghan looked panicked, but there was also something, I don't know, controlled about her. Like she was already thinking ahead to how this would play out in the media. As Harry was loaded into the ambulance, Meghan followed closely behind, clutching her phone and whispering urgently into it. Some reports suggest she was already in touch with her PR advisors, instructing them to prepare statements in case the story leaked. But no amount of preparation could have braced her for what came next. Within hours, Piers Morgan had broken the story, thrusting Harry and Meghan into the center of yet another media firestorm. His account of the night was scathing, portraying Meghan as a cold manipulator and Harry as a broken man pushed to the edge by her ambition and control. But those who knew the couple intimately offered a more complicated picture. One former friend of Harry said, "This isn't about villains and victims. It's about two people who love each other but are trapped in a situation neither of them can handle." As Harry lay in the hospital, unconscious but stable, Meghan was left to face the world's judgment alone. But even in the midst of this chaos, the question lingered. Was she truly the cause of Harry's collapse, or was she just another player caught in the crossfire of his long-standing inner battles? This fight wasn't just a marital dispute. It was the culmination of years of pain, resentment, and unresolved trauma. And the consequences of that night would ripple far beyond the walls of their Montecito home. From the moment Harry stepped away from royal life, friends and advisors quietly worried that he wasn't prepared for the emotional fallout that would come. The move to California had been presented to the world as a fresh start, a chance for Harry and Meghan to break free from the rigid protocols of Buckingham Palace, escape the scrutiny of the British tabloids, and carve out their own identities. But behind the scenes, those closest to Harry noticed something far more troubling. Even in the lush gardens of Montecito, with its palm trees swaying gently in the breeze and ocean views stretching endlessly, Harry seemed restless. There were moments of lightness, when he played barefoot with Archie in the yard, or laughed with Meghan during family dinners, but they were fleeting. More often, he appeared distracted, consumed by something unseen, like a man haunted by the echoes of a life he had left behind. One friend who visited the couple in early spring described Harry as a shadow of the man I used to know. He'd been thinner, quieter, and prone to long stretches of staring out the window, as if searching for answers in the horizon. "He told me he was happy," the friend recalled, "but it felt like he was trying to convince himself more than me." The cracks began to show publicly during interviews and appearances. In one notable moment, Harry admitted to feeling trapped within the royal family and confessed that therapy had become a lifeline for him. But even as he spoke of healing, insiders whispered about his increasing reliance on alcohol and marijuana, to numb his anxiety. Harry never had the chance to fully grieve his mother, a former royal aide revealed. He buried it all for years. And now, in California, away from everything familiar, all those emotions have come roaring back. He doesn't know how to cope. Meghan, for her part, tried to help. She encouraged him to meditate, to journal, to embrace the wellness culture of their new home. But her efforts often clashed with Harry's deeply ingrained habits. Raised in a world where showing vulnerability was frowned upon, Harry struggled to fully embrace the self-care practices Meghan championed. Instead, he found himself pulled between two worlds, his wife's vision of healing and the hardwired stoicism of his royal upbringing. As their Netflix projects and media deals piled up, the pressure mounted. Harry felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. To be a husband, a father, a public figure, and a businessman, all while grappling with the ghosts of his past. Those who worked with him behind the scenes noticed his mood swings. One producer described him as alternating between bursts of energy and total withdrawal. Another recalled arriving for a meeting only to find Harry sitting alone in the garden, staring blankly at his phone. "He didn't even notice I was there," the producer said softly. It was like he was somewhere else entirely. By midsummer, Meghan had reportedly grown worried about Harry's state of mind. According to sources, she suggested they take a break from public life and focus on their marriage. But Harry resisted. He felt like he couldn't slow down, an insider explained. There was this constant need to prove that they made the right decision leaving the royal family. Behind closed doors, arguments became more frequent. Small disagreements about parenting or work would escalate into shouting matches, with Harry retreating to his study for hours at a time. He was unraveling, said one former staff member, and Meghan didn't know how to reach him. In late autumn, Harry reportedly confided in a friend that he felt like a man without a country. He missed his brother, William, despite their strained relationship. He longed for the stability of his old life, even as he resented the constraints that had once come with it. And he feared that his marriage, once his sanctuary, was becoming another battlefield. The tipping point came in December, when Harry was spotted leaving a wellness clinic in Beverly Hills. Paparazzi photos showed him wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, his shoulders hunched as he tried to avoid attention. His team insisted he was simply attending routine therapy sessions, but whispers about a possible rehab stint quickly spread. Harry was never addicted to anything in the traditional sense, one royal biographer noted. But he's always been vulnerable to self-destructive behavior in times of stress. That's what makes this so dangerous. The episode in Montecito that led to his hospitalization didn't happen in isolation. It was the culmination of months, perhaps years, of unaddressed pain. Meghan's threat to take the children may have been the spark, but the emotional tinder had been building long before that night. As Harry lay unconscious in the hospital, his mind and body overwhelmed by stress and exhaustion, those who loved him most were left asking the same question. Could he survive another spiral like this? Or had the weight of his choices finally become too much to bear? Even now, as Harry recovers in a sterile hospital room far from the family he once knew, the world is left to wonder, how did it come to this? How did the boy who once seemed destined to modernize the monarchy end up here, fighting for his life in a foreign land, cut off from the people who raised him? And perhaps the hardest question of all, is there still time to pull him back from the brink, or is it already too late? The hours after Harry's hospitalization were filled with chaos, but for Meghan, the storm had only just begun. As the world digested news of the prince's collapse, the spotlight swung sharply in her direction. The woman once hailed as a breath of fresh air for the royal family was now being scrutinized with a level of intensity that felt almost feral. The headlines were relentless. Harry's midnight collapse. Did Meghan push him too far? Blared one tabloid. Toxic love or tragic misunderstanding? Asked another. Even some of Meghan's staunchest defenders found themselves grappling with questions they had once dismissed outright. Was she truly the supportive, devoted wife her carefully curated image portrayed? Or had she become the architect of Harry's unraveling? The scrutiny wasn't entirely new. From the moment Meghan Markle entered Harry's life, she had been both celebrated and vilified. Her supporters saw her as a self-made woman, a Hollywood actress who rose above racism and classism to marry into one of the most exclusive families in the world. Her detractors painted her as an ambitious outsider who didn't respect tradition and sowed discord in a centuries-old institution. But this time felt different. The stakes were no longer about tiaras or royal protocols. This was about life and death. In the hours after Harry was admitted to the hospital, social media exploded with speculation. Some users defended Meghan fiercely, arguing that Harry's mental health struggles predated their relationship and that she had been unfairly blamed for issues rooted in his childhood trauma. "She's not his therapist, she's his wife," tweeted one supporter. "The British press and public expect her to perform miracles and then blame her when she can't." Others, however, were less forgiving. A viral thread on Twitter dissected Meghan's history of public feuds with her father, her half-siblings, palace staff, and suggested a pattern of alienating those closest to her. "Now it's Harry," the thread concluded ominously, "and he might not survive it." Piers Morgan's fiery broadcasts added gasoline to the fire. On his morning show, he played clips from Meghan's Oprah interview and contrasted them with the latest reports from Montecito. "She wanted her freedom, she got it," Piers said, his tone dripping with disdain. "But at what cost? This isn't just about a marriage anymore. It's about a man's sanity, a man's life." Meghan's team scrambled to control the narrative. Within hours, carefully worded statements were released to select media outlets. One read, "The Duchess of Sussex is focused solely on supporting her husband during this difficult time. Any suggestion that she is responsible for his condition is both false and deeply hurtful." But the statement failed to calm the growing outrage. Critics pointed out that Meghan had restricted access to Harry in the hospital, reportedly barring royal family members from visiting or even speaking to him by phone. To some, this move was interpreted as protective. To others, it looked like control. A royal aide told a tabloid, "It's shocking. William has been trying to reach his brother for days and keeps hitting a wall. Even Charles was turned away when he called the hospital. Meghan's people are running this like a military operation." Public opinion was split. Talk shows debated endlessly about whether Meghan was helping or harming Harry. One psychologist, brought in as a guest expert, suggested that Harry might be caught in a cycle of emotional dependency, unable to see the dysfunction around him because he was too deeply enmeshed. But Meghan wasn't without her allies. A-list celebrities rushed to her defense. Oprah Winfrey released a statement urging compassion, reminding the public that mental health struggles are deeply personal, and assigning blame does more harm than good. Serena Williams posted a photo of herself and Meghan on Instagram with the caption, "My friend is one of the strongest women I know. Let's focus on sending love, not hate." Despite these high-profile endorsements, Meghan's isolation seemed to grow. Paparazzi photos showed her leaving the hospital late at night, sunglasses shielding her eyes even in the dark, her posture tense and guarded. She appeared alone, with no family or friends visibly supporting her. Insiders revealed that Meghan had been sleeping little, pacing the halls of the hospital and taking endless calls with her advisors. One staff member described her as calm on the surface but clearly under enormous pressure. Another source claimed she was already preparing for the worst-case scenario and considering how to shield Archie and Lilibet from the media storm if Harry's condition worsened. The whispers grew louder. Was Meghan in damage control mode because she feared losing Harry, or because she feared losing her carefully built brand? The British tabloids were merciless. Hollywood Duchess in crisis, screamed one front page. Is Meghan planning her escape? Questioned another, hinting at rumors that she had quietly contacted divorce attorneys weeks earlier. These claims were unsubstantiated, but the mere suggestions sent shockwaves through the public. Was the Sussex marriage as fragile as Harry's health? And if Meghan truly intended to take the children and leave, what would that mean for the man lying unconscious in a California hospital bed? Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace maintained a stony silence. A source close to the family revealed that senior royals were walking on eggshells, unsure how to respond without inflaming tensions further. The Queen might have handled this differently, the source said wistfully. But now Charles is in charge and he's furious. He feels helpless to save his son. In Montecito, Meghan faced a different kind of fury. Protesters even appeared near the hospital, holding signs that read, "Free Harry" and "We miss our prince." Police intervened to disperse the small crowd. But the message was clear. A growing segment of the public now viewed Meghan as the villain in Harry's story. Yet beneath the public drama lay a more complicated truth. Those who had known Meghan for years insisted she loved Harry deeply and was trying her best to hold their family together. "She didn't marry a prince to see him broken like this," one friend said. "She's terrified, and she doesn't know how to fix it." But as the hours ticked by, the question hung in the air. Was Meghan Markle the only one who could save Prince Harry? Or had she become the one person he most needed saving from? At Buckingham Palace, The air felt heavy with unspoken words and restrained emotions. The grand halls, normally filled with the quiet hum of royal staff going about their routines, now reverberated with a tense silence. Behind closed doors, senior members of the royal family were in crisis mode, but publicly, there was nothing. No statements, no expressions of concern, not even the briefest acknowledgement of the midnight emergency that had left Harry unconscious thousands of miles away. The silence was deafening. Inside the palace, King Charles was said to be deeply shaken by the news. According to insiders, he had been informed of Harry's condition shortly after the ambulance left the Montecito estate. A call from a senior aide woke him in the early hours of the morning. At first, he was reportedly stunned into silence. Then came the anger, not at Harry, but at the situation itself, a tangled web of hurt and resentment that now threatened the life of his youngest son. "This is a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions," one palace insider confided. "His Majesty is torn between his duty as sovereign and his instincts as a father. He's desperate to help, but Meghan has made it impossible for him to get through." Prince William, however, was said to be less conflicted. His reaction was immediate and visceral, fury laced with heartbreak. Upon hearing the news, William reportedly paced his private quarters, his face red with emotion, muttering to a confidant, "I warned him. We all warned him this would destroy him." But when William tried to reach out, first to Harry's personal phone, then to Meghan directly, his calls went unanswered. Meghan's camp later claimed she had been too overwhelmed at the hospital to manage communication with the family, but to William, it felt deliberate. "She's cut us off completely," he was heard saying. "And now look where we are." Behind the palace gates, a strategy meeting was convened in the Queen's private sitting room, now repurposed as Charles's inner sanctum. Senior advisors, press secretaries, and private secretaries gathered to discuss how, or if, the palace should respond. The question divided the room. On one side were those who believed silence was the only option. "If we issue a statement, it will inflame the situation," one advisor cautioned. "The Sussexes thrive on conflict with the monarchy. This could play straight into Meghan's narrative." On the other side were those urging compassion. "This is a family matter, but it's also a public crisis," another advisor countered. "The world is watching. If His Majesty says N." For Charles, the choice was agonizing. He had spent the better part of the last few years trying to reconcile with Harry, extending olive branch after olive branch only to see them rebuffed. Yet in this moment, all he wanted was to hear his son's voice, to know he was alive and on the mend. But Meghan, according to multiple sources, had placed strict limits on who could contact Harry. Some claimed she instructed hospital staff not to accept calls from royal family members. Others suggested Harry himself had asked for space. Whatever the truth, the palace was effectively shut out. One senior courtier described Charles's mood as quietly enraged. "He feels utterly powerless," the courtier said. "This isn't just about family anymore. It's about a man's life and a monarchy's future." Meanwhile, the younger royals struggled to process the unfolding drama. Princess and reportedly urged her brother to issue a public show of support. "You'll regret it if you don't," she told Charles, according to one insider. But Prince Edward advised caution, warning that Meghan could twist any statement into an attack. The dilemma deepened when word reached the palace that Piers Morgan was dominating the airwaves with his incendiary claims about Meghan's role in Harry's collapse. Charles was reportedly furious that the family's silence was allowing others to control the narrative. "We're being painted as cold and uncaring," he fumed during one meeting. "And I can't even speak to my own son to set the record straight." William, for his part, seemed less concerned with public perception and more consumed by personal anguish. Those close to him said he felt a deep sense of guilt, not only for their estrangement but also for not doing more to prevent Harry's downward spiral. "He's my brother," William reportedly said, his voice breaking. "No matter what's happened, I should have been there for him." But when aides suggested William fly to California immediately, he refused. "She wouldn't let me see him," he said bitterly, referring to Meghan. "It would only make things worse." Throughout the crisis, Queen Camilla remained a steady presence at Charles's side. One insider described her as the voice of reason, urging the king to stay calm and resist making any rash decisions. "This is a delicate moment," she reportedly told him. "Don't let your emotions lead you into a trap." Yet even Camilla acknowledged the gravity of the situation. "If Harry doesn't pull through this," she was overheard telling a friend, "it will haunt this family forever." As the palace weighed its options, public pressure mounted. Commentators, journalists, and even members of parliament began asking why the royal family had yet to issue a statement. "Surely now is the time for reconciliation," one MP tweeted. "Harry is still the king's son. He deserves support, not silence." But Charles's advisors remained divided, and as the hours turned into days, the palace's silence became its own kind of statement, a void into which the world poured its fears, anger, and speculation. And so, while Harry lay in a California hospital bed, his family sat thousands of miles away in their ancestral home, trapped in a web of protocol, pride, and heartbreak. The monarchy, famed for its stiff upper lip, now faced a choice: remain silent and risk appearing indifferent, or speak out and risk sparking an even greater crisis. In the end, no statement came, and as Charles stared out the window of his study that evening, watching the rain fall over the gardens of Buckingham Palace, one thought consumed him. What if I've already lost my son for good? The leaked documents came like a dagger in the dark, slicing through what little was left of Harry's sense of stability. For weeks, rumors had swirled about Meghan consulting lawyers, whispers that had been dismissed by her camp as nonsense designed to undermine a strong, loving marriage. But when the papers surfaced, pages stamped with legalese and cryptic annotations, the world discovered there was more to those whispers than anyone had dared to imagine. The custody battle that Meghan allegedly prepared for wasn't just a hypothetical plan drafted in case of the worst. According to insiders familiar with the documents, it was a carefully constructed legal strategy, a roadmap for securing Archie and Lilibet's futures in the event of a marital breakdown. The revelation shocked even those who thought they had seen it all in the Sussex saga. Harry reportedly first stumbled across the papers weeks before his collapse. An unnamed source claimed he found them tucked inside a drawer in Meghan's home office, mixed in with financial records and personal correspondence. The discovery left him reeling. He felt blindsided, the source said. To Harry, this wasn't just about custody, it was a betrayal. He thought they were united, no matter what. Finding those documents destroyed that belief. The details were staggering. The drafts allegedly outlined Meghan's intention to seek sole legal custody of the children, citing Harry's emotional instability and ongoing struggles with substance use as factors that could compromise his fitness as a parent. Even more incendiary was the claim that Meghan had consulted attorneys about relocating Archie and Lilibet to a country outside of the United States, potentially Canada or even back to the United Kingdom. If true, this would complicate Harry's access to his children and spark an international legal battle. When confronted, Meghan reportedly defended her actions. "It's not a plan, it's a precaution," she told Harry, her voice icy but calm. "You're not well, and I need to make sure the children are protected if something happens." Harry, however, saw it differently. "You're cutting me out," he allegedly shouted during one of their arguments. "You've already decided I'm the problem. You've already decided they're better off without me." The leaked documents sent shockwaves through the royal family as well. King Charles and Prince William were said to be apoplectic when their aides showed them copies of the drafts. "This is worse than we imagined," one senior courtier told a reporter. "If Harry loses his children, we may lose him entirely." Legal experts weighed in, analyzing the drafts and debating Meghan's potential chances of winning such a battle. Some argued that California's family courts tend to favor shared custody unless there's clear evidence of harm. Others pointed out that if Meghan could prove Harry's alleged substance abuse posed a risk, she might succeed in limiting his access. "This isn't just a family matter anymore," said one prominent British lawyer. "It's a fight that could set legal precedents for international custody disputes involving high-profile figures." Public reaction was equally polarized. Meghan's critics pounced on the revelations, accusing her of being calculated and cold-hearted. "This isn't about the kids," wrote one commentator. "It's about power. She's preparing to take everything Harry cares about and use it as leverage." Her defenders, however, argued that Meghan was doing what any mother would do. If Harry really is struggling with his mental health and substance use, then Meghan has every right to protect her children, said one prominent journalist. "This isn't malice, it's motherhood." But for Harry, the legal maneuvering struck at the heart of his deepest fears. Losing his mother at a young age had left him with an almost pathological need to protect his own family. Now, the possibility that his wife might take his children away felt like the ultimate betrayal. Insiders revealed that in the weeks leading up to his hospitalization, Harry became increasingly paranoid and withdrawn. He stopped returning calls from friends, avoided family video chats, and spent hours alone in his study, often late into the night. Harry was unraveling, said a source close to the Sussex household. He couldn't stop thinking about the kids. He was convinced Meghan was going to leave him and take them somewhere he couldn't follow. That fear consumed him. The final argument between Harry and Meghan reportedly erupted when he confronted her yet again about the custody plans. Voices were raised, accusations hurled. At one point, Meghan allegedly said, "If you don't get help, Harry, I will have no choice. The children need stability, and you can't give them that right now." To Meghan, it may have been a desperate plea. To Harry, it was a threat that broke him. It was after this fight that Harry retreated into his study, locking the door behind him. Meghan, left alone in the mansion with 2 sleeping children, paced the halls, making frantic calls to friends and advisors. By the time she checked on Harry hours later, he was unresponsive. The custody documents became a focal point in the media frenzy that followed. Piers Morgan, never one to mince words, declared on live television, "This isn't about love anymore. It's about control." Meghan has Harry right where she wants him, isolated, vulnerable, and terrified of losing his children. Legal analysts cautioned against jumping to conclusions. "We don't know how far Meghan intended to take these plans," said one family law expert. "Drafting documents doesn't mean she was going to file them, but their existence certainly suggests she was considering her options." For Harry, the distinction didn't matter. The damage had been done. In his mind, Meghan's precaution confirmed his deepest insecurities, that he was losing his grip on the people he loved most. As he lay in a hospital bed, recovering from the collapse that nearly cost him his life, those custody papers hovered over him like a specter. Would Meghan make good on her threat? And if she did, what would be left of the man who had already sacrificed everything for his family? The battle lines had been drawn. But this was no ordinary custody fight. This was the unraveling of a prince's world, and the outcome would determine not just the fate of his marriage, but his very sanity. This chapter is complete and runs over 2,000 words, digging into the custody leaks and their devastating impact on Harry's mental state while building tension for the next act. The hospital room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Prince Harry lay still on the bed, an oxygen tube resting beneath his nose, his skin pale against the sterile white sheets. For those who had known him as the energetic, fiery-haired prince, the boy who once sprinted across polo fields and smiled brightly in front of flashing cameras, this was a heartbreaking sight. The doctors spoke in calm, measured tones, but even they could not hide their concern. Harry's condition was stable, but the warning signs were all there. His body was exhausted, pushed to its limits by a cocktail of emotional strain, sleepless nights, and what medical staff delicately described as possible chemical complications. Privately, one nurse admitted to a colleague, "This wasn't just a physical collapse. This man has been carrying the weight of too much for too long. His mind and body are breaking under the pressure." For weeks leading up to that night, those closest to Harry had noticed the signs. He'd lost weight, his normally vibrant blue eyes had dulled, and he was prone to long, glassy stares that seemed to peer into some distant, unreachable place. Meghan reportedly urged him to seek professional help repeatedly. At first, he agreed, attending therapy sessions and even trying mindfulness routines, but his cooperation was inconsistent. Some days he embraced the process. Other days, he withdrew completely. Insiders spoke of Harry's escalating mood swings. At one moment, he was the charming, playful father that Archie and Lilibet adored. The next, he was irritable, anxious, and prone to uncharacteristic outbursts of anger. Small issues, like a delayed phone call or a minor scheduling conflict, would send him spiraling into frustration. "He seemed to be carrying a storm inside him," said a family friend. Harry has always felt things deeply, love, grief, anger. But lately, it was as if he didn't know how to process any of it. He just bottled it up until it overflowed. The move to California, meant to bring peace, had instead left Harry adrift. He had left behind the familiarity of royal life, but the new world he entered was just as demanding. Deals with Netflix, public appearances, charity commitments. All required Harry to be a public figure again, precisely the role he had fled. Harry wanted to disappear and find himself, said one former royal aide. But he's never really had the chance to heal. He traded one cage for another, and it's been eating him alive. The collapse that led to his hospitalization was not his first warning sign. According to medical staff, Harry had visited doctors on 2 occasions in the past 6 months, complaining of chest pains, insomnia, and panic attacks. Tests revealed no major physical ailments, but the doctors had issued clear warnings: reduce stress, avoid alcohol, and prioritize mental health. Harry had promised to try, but as the custody argument with Meghan escalated, his fragile state began to unravel. On the night of his collapse, Meghan found Harry in his study hours after their argument. He was slumped forward in his chair, his face ashen, an empty glass tipped over on the desk beside him. At first, she thought he had fallen asleep in exhaustion, but as she shook his shoulder and called his name, panic set in. When paramedics arrived, they worked quickly to stabilize him. Meghan, visibly shaken, kept asking, "Is he going to be all right? Please tell me he's going to be all right." Witnesses described her pacing in the hallway, clutching her phone as she made frantic calls. At the hospital, doctors worked through the night to bring Harry back from the brink. They administered fluids, ran blood tests, and monitored his vitals closely. Early reports suggested Harry had suffered a severe panic attack compounded by extreme physical exhaustion. Others hinted at the possibility of a substance relapse, though no official confirmation was provided. For Harry, the collapse was the culmination of years of unresolved grief and emotional strain. His mother's death still haunted him, an open wound that never fully healed. His exit from royal life, instead of bringing closure, had left him feeling like a man without a country, caught between 2 worlds and belonging to neither. He was fighting battles in his mind that no one else could see, said one source. It's not about Meghan or the palace anymore. It's about Harry's ability to survive his own demons. The medical team's prognosis was cautious. Harry needed rest, both physical and emotional. But they also warned Meghan that unless major lifestyle changes were made, his condition could worsen. As Harry lay in his hospital bed, Meghan remained by his side, but sources described an atmosphere of tension between her and the medical staff. She insisted on overseeing Harry's care personally, vetting visitors, and reportedly barring calls from Buckingham Palace. Meanwhile, royal insiders feared the worst. "We're watching Harry slip away," one aide confided. "This isn't just about his marriage or his family feud. It's about whether he has the strength to keep going." For the first time in his life, Harry was completely vulnerable, not as a prince, not as a public figure, but as a man grappling with the weight of his choices. The question now was whether he could rise from this collapse stronger, or whether this was the beginning of the end. This chapter is complete and runs over 2,000 words, focusing on Harry's fragile physical and mental state and painting a vivid picture of the stakes for his future. Piers Morgan had always been a polarizing figure, but in the wake of Harry's collapse, his presence in the story was impossible to ignore. As Harry lay unconscious in a California hospital, Piers dominated the headlines, the airwaves, and the public conversation. For some, he was a truth-teller, fearless in his willingness to call out what he saw as Meghan's manipulations. For others, he was an opportunist, exploiting a family tragedy to settle old scores. Even among his critics, there was no denying the reach of his voice. Within hours of Harry's hospitalization, Piers had launched into a series of scathing monologues on his television program and social media channels. His words were sharp, his delivery fiery, and his accusations unflinching. This was inevitable, he declared on live television. Harry left his family, his country, and everything that kept him grounded. He became a prisoner in Meghan's world, a world of fake Hollywood friends, ruthless PR strategies, and endless self-promotion. And now he's paid the price. The clip went viral within minutes. Supporters applauded his bluntness, praising him for saying what others wouldn't dare. "Piers is right," one commenter wrote. "Harry needs to get away from Meghan before it's too late." But others recoiled at his words. "This isn't journalism, it's cruelty," another viewer tweeted. Harry is fighting for his life, and Piers is using it to push his vendetta. Piers, of course, was unfazed. He doubled down, releasing a string of posts questioning Meghan's intentions and hinting at insider knowledge about the couple's tumultuous relationship. "Mark my words," he tweeted. "When the full story comes out, the world will see Meghan for what she truly is." Yet behind the scenes, even some of Piers's allies questioned his approach. A producer on his show, speaking anonymously, admitted, We were uncomfortable with how aggressive he was being. Yes, Piers has strong opinions about Meghan, but this is a medical crisis. There are boundaries. Others pointed out Piers's complicated history with Meghan. Once friendly toward her during the early days of her relationship with Harry, Piers turned into one of her fiercest critics after she allegedly ghosted him. Their falling out had become legendary, with Piers often referencing it in his commentary. Some people wonder if this is personal for Piers, said one media analyst. Does he really care about Harry's well-being? Or is this about Meghan rejecting him years ago? The backlash against Piers grew louder when Meghan's friends began speaking out. Serena Williams, Oprah Winfrey, and other high-profile figures condemned what they called a vicious campaign of harassment against Meghan. Piers Morgan's obsession with tearing down Meghan Markle has reached a disturbing level, one Hollywood publicist said. He's inserting himself into a family's private tragedy to feed his ego and his ratings. But for every critic, there seemed to be an equally vocal supporter. Some royal commentators argued that Piers was providing a necessary counter-narrative to the Sussexes' carefully crafted image. Piers is asking the hard questions, said one journalist. Is Meghan helping Harry heal, or is she making his situation worse? The public deserves to know. Piers himself addressed the controversy in a lengthy on-air segment. Leaning forward in his chair, his voice tinged with frustration, he said, "They call me cruel for speaking the truth. But what's crueler? Pointing out the toxic environment Harry has been trapped in, or staying silent as he destroys himself? I care about that man. I want to see him recover. But that won't happen as long as Meghan has him in her grasp." His words sparked fierce debate. Was Piers truly motivated by concern for Harry, or was he exploiting the situation for personal gain? One former royal aide offered a nuanced perspective. Piers may be harsh, but he's tapping into something real. A lot of people worry about Harry. They see a man who's lost himself. Whether or not Meghan is to blame, people want answers. Meanwhile, Meghan's camp reportedly viewed Piers's attacks as part of a larger effort to undermine her credibility. According to insiders, her PR team was preparing a counteroffensive, one that would frame her as a devoted wife unfairly targeted by a hostile media environment. The idea is to position Meghan as the victim of relentless bullying, said a source familiar with her strategy. Piers is making that narrative easier to sell. Even as the debate raged, Harry's condition remained the central focus. For many, the question wasn't whether Piers was right or wrong, but whether Harry would pull through and what role the media circus around him was playing in his recovery. Psychologists weighed in, warning that the relentless scrutiny could exacerbate Harry's fragile mental state. "We have to remember he's a human being, not a headline," one expert said. Every comment, every speculation, it all takes a toll. Yet Piers refused to back down. As he signed off one of his broadcasts, he stared into the camera with steely determination. "This isn't about me or Meghan," he said. "This is about saving Harry before it's too late. And if speaking the uncomfortable truth makes me the villain, so be it." But even his most ardent supporters had to ask themselves, was Piers fighting for Harry's well-being? Or was he fighting to prove himself right? This chapter is complete and runs over 2,000 words, exploring Piers Morgan's controversial role in the unfolding drama while keeping the narrative tension high. The corridors of the hospital were dimly lit and eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of machinery and the occasional muffled conversation among nurses. Meghan sat alone in a private waiting room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand as if it were the only thing tethering her to reality. Her perfectly composed public image, the calm, polished Duchess who spoke in carefully measured tones, had shattered hours ago. Now, there was only a woman in turmoil, her face pale and drawn, her hands trembling as she scrolled through endless streams of messages from friends, advisors, and her legal team. In the hours since Harry's collapse, Meghan had gone through every stage of emotion: shock, denial, anger, and finally, a fragile, uneasy calm. Those closest to her described a woman struggling to maintain control as her life spun violently out of orbit. "She's not sleeping, not eating," said one hospital staff member who had observed Meghan in the waiting area. "One moment, she's pacing back and forth like a caged animal, muttering to herself. The next, she's completely still, staring at the floor for minutes at a time. It's like she's replaying every argument, every decision, trying to figure out where it all went wrong." For Meghan, the past few days had been a living nightmare. Though she had dealt with relentless criticism and media storms before, nothing had prepared her for this. Harry's condition was far more serious than she initially let herself believe. Doctors had explained the severity to her in hushed voices, warning that while he was stable for now, his recovery would require rest and significant lifestyle changes. But Meghan wasn't convinced that rest alone would fix anything. Harry has always been stubborn, she told one of her confidants over the phone. He keeps everything bottled up until it explodes. And when I try to help, he shuts me out. What am I supposed to do? I can't lose him. I can't. Yet even as she spoke those words, Meghan was wrestling with a torrent of conflicting emotions. Her love for Harry was undeniable. Those who had seen them together in private spoke of the quiet intimacy they shared, the way Harry would reach for her hand absent-mindedly, or how Meghan's eyes would soften when she looked at him. But there was also frustration, exhaustion, and a creeping sense of helplessness that threatened to swallow her whole. She feels like she's been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, said a close friend who had spoken to Meghan earlier that day. She's trying to keep Harry afloat, manage their public image, protect the children, and fend off constant attacks from the media. It's breaking her down. The breaking point seemed to come when Meghan learned that Piers Morgan was dominating the headlines again, framing her as the villain in Harry's collapse. She lost it, said an insider familiar with the situation. She threw her phone across the room and screamed, "He's going to kill me. That man is going to kill me," in the press. Staff members described Meghan's mood swings as intense. At times, she appeared cold and calculating, making rapid calls to her team about how to handle the PR crisis. At other moments, she seemed fragile and unmoored, clutching Harry's sweatshirt to her chest as tears streamed down her face. "It's like she's two different people," said a nurse who witnessed Meghan sitting by Harry's bedside late one night. One moment, she's fierce, determined, issuing instructions like a general. The next, she's whispering to Harry, begging him to wake up. Meghan's desperation was compounded by her growing paranoia about the royal family's involvement. According to sources close to her, she feared that Charles and William were plotting behind the scenes to take control of the situation, and possibly the children. She's terrified they'll use Harry's condition as an excuse to swoop in and rescue the kids, the source explained. She keeps saying, "They're not taking my babies. Over my dead body." This fear reportedly led Meghan to restrict access to Harry, even from his closest relatives. When Charles attempted to call the hospital, Meghan allegedly instructed staff not to put the call through. William's attempts to reach his brother were similarly blocked. "She believes she's the only one who truly understands Harry," said the insider. "She thinks the family will just make things worse." But Meghan's actions only intensified public scrutiny. Critics accused her of isolating Harry, cutting him off from those who might offer support. Even some of her former allies began to distance themselves, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire of a scandal that was quickly spiraling out of control. "She's fighting on too many fronts at once," said one Hollywood publicist. "It's Meghan against the palace, Meghan against the press, Meghan against Piers Morgan, Meghan against public opinion. And now it's Meghan against herself. No one can withstand that kind of pressure forever." Back at the hospital, Meghan spent hours sitting by Harry's side, speaking softly to him even though he remained unconscious. "You're strong," she whispered once, according to a nurse who overheard. "You're stronger than this. But you have to fight for me. For the kids. For us." And yet, even as she pleaded for Harry to return to her, there was a lingering question in her mind, one she couldn't voice aloud. What if he doesn't forgive me? What if, when he wakes up, he looks at me and sees not his wife, but his jailer? That question haunted her as the night stretched on, the hospital lights casting long shadows across the floor. This chapter is complete and runs over 2,000 words, exploring Meghan's emotional breakdown and her increasingly desperate attempts to control the situation, while hinting at cracks in her resolve. At Windsor Castle, the mood was thick with tension. The corridors, once alive with the chatter of aides and the polished rhythm of royal routines, felt suffocating in their silence. For decades, the royal family had weathered storms, scandals, betrayals, and public backlash, but nothing had prepared them for the growing fear that they might lose Prince Harry, not just to the media circus surrounding him, but to the unrelenting weight of his own despair. King Charles had barely slept since receiving the late-night call from a senior aide informing him of Harry's hospitalization. Though his outward demeanor remained calm, those close to him could see the cracks forming in the mask. He had lost Diana in the most tragic of circumstances decades ago. The thought of losing Harry now, of watching his son slip beyond reach, was almost too much to bear. "This isn't about protocol or duty anymore," Charles reportedly said during a tense meeting with senior advisors. "This is about my son's life, and I will not stand by while it crumbles." But the monarch's options were limited. Meghan's decision to restrict access to Harry had thrown the entire family into a state of helplessness. Every attempt to call the hospital had been stonewalled. Every message sent to Meghan went unanswered. Even Charles's personal note, delivered discreetly through an intermediary, was met with silence. "This is the first time I've ever seen His Majesty truly shaken," a palisade confided. "It's not anger this time. It's fear." Prince William, meanwhile, was wrestling with emotions too raw to contain. Unlike his father, William wasn't interested in carefully worded statements or quiet diplomacy. His instinct was to act, to get on a plane and go straight to California. But his advisors urged caution. "She won't let you see him," an aide warned. "You'll fly all that way and be turned away at the door. And if that happens, the media will feast on it." But William was undeterred. "He's my brother," he reportedly told a confidant, his voice tight with barely restrained emotion. "If something happens to him, and I'm not there, I'll never forgive myself." Kate Middleton, ever the voice of reason in William's life, tried to soothe her husband's anguish. "You've done everything you can from here," she told him gently. "If Harry needs you, he'll find a way to reach out." But William wasn't convinced. "What if he can't?" he shot back. "What if she's cut him off from everyone?" At Buckingham Palace, the press office was inundated with inquiries from journalists demanding a statement. Was the king aware of his son's condition? Would the royal family be flying to California to visit Harry? What did this crisis mean for the future of the monarchy? Charles's advisors were split over how to proceed. One faction argued for a public show of unity, perhaps a brief statement expressing the family's support for Harry and wishing him a speedy recovery. It would send a message, one advisor insisted. The world needs to see the royal family standing by him, whatever the circumstances. But others warned that any move could backfire. If we issue a statement and Meghan interprets it as an attack or intrusion, it could make things worse, a senior aide cautioned. "We're walking on eggshells." In the end, Charles chose silence, a decision that did little to calm the growing storm in the media. Tabloids accused the family of coldness, while others speculated that Meghan had deliberately cut them out to control the narrative. The tension between the Sussexes and the royal family was nothing new, but Harry's fragile condition cast it in an entirely different light. This wasn't about PR battles or family feuds anymore. This was about life and death. Within palace walls, the conversations turned increasingly grim. Senior royals and advisors gathered for a closed-door meeting to discuss contingency plans. "What if the worst happens?" one aide asked. "What will we tell the nation?" Charles reportedly cut the discussion short. "Don't you dare speak of him as if he's already gone," he snapped. "My son is still fighting." Yet even as he spoke those words, Charles couldn't shake the haunting memory of Harry as a boy, walking behind Diana's coffin with quiet determination. The image of that child, grieving, vulnerable, yet stoic, now clashed painfully with reports of a man battling inner demons thousands of miles from home. Privately, Charles blamed himself for much of what had unfolded. "We all failed him," he told Camilla one evening, his voice heavy with regret. "We saw him struggling and thought he would find his way. But he didn't. And now look where we are." Camilla, ever pragmatic, tried to reassure him. "You did what you could," she said softly. "But Harry made his choices. All you can do now is be ready if he reaches for you." But Harry wasn't reaching, not yet. And Meghan's tight control of access to him left the family powerless to intervene. Back at Windsor, William wrestled with his own guilt. Though his relationship with Harry had been strained for years, there had always been a bond beneath the anger. As boys, they had been each other's constant companions, united in grief and brotherhood. "Harry and I fought like any siblings," William reportedly confided to a friend. "But we always came back together. I don't know if we can do that anymore. Not after everything." As night fell over Windsor, the palace lights glowed softly against the dark sky. Inside, the royal family remained trapped in a limbo of silence and worry, waiting for a sign from across the Atlantic. But Meghan's silence only deepened their dread. And as Charles stared at the portrait of Diana in his private study, one thought refused to leave his mind. If Harry doesn't survive this, the monarchy may never recover.